What about things like caffeine? Is this where some people can tolerate caffeine better than others? Is this the genetics coming in?
Absolutely. So there are similarities to vitamin D, but it's kind of the opposite. So with caffeine, there is a receptor, again, that interacts with the caffeine, and that can mean that it's super powered. So whereas the vitamin D was about the message not getting through, with the caffeine, it's about the message being really loud. And so for some people, they get a massively stimulating effect from a small amount of caffeine. And so it's as if the spike is bigger. But again, they might not realise, and they might not connect a jitteriness with the caffeine. Depends how aware you are. So, you know, if you do these tests and you see these kinds of results, it can get you thinking and just be more self-aware.
Yeah. How common is that, to have the gene where the caffeine gets amplified?
It's really common. Again, I think it's about 20%.
Okay.
I've got that.
I've got it too.
And I get really jittery. And I used to do daft things like, if I was presenting, I'd have loads and loads of caffeine before I presented. But actually, my adrenaline was already really high. Yeah. And so I'd go and present and I'd be quite shaky. And that's the last thing you want when you're presenting, isn't it?
Yeah, of course.
It was kind of a weird sabotage thing going on. But it enabled me just to kind of, you know, take stock and not do that anymore.
Yeah.
And then there's another dimension to caffeine as well, which is how long it lasts.
Okay, so that's interesting. Tell us a little bit about that.
So there's a gene that detoxifies the caffeine or deactivates it. And so you can have a slow version of that, which means that the caffeine effect lasts for hours and hours and hours, compared to someone who's got the fast version, which means the caffeine is whipped out more quickly. So if you've got the higher sensitivity and the slow removal, then that caffeine's going to have a bigger effect and it's going to be with you for longer.
Right.
And that's not necessarily bad.
Yeah.
It just depends what you want to achieve with the caffeine, doesn't it?
If you're trying to sleep and you're having a coffee at 6 p.m, probably not the best thing.
No.
I'm with you completely. I remember having a coffee, my last coffee, which was probably about 8 years ago now. And I remember having it before a lecture. And I don't even know why I had one. I very rarely would occasionally have had a decaf coffee before. And I had this coffee and I literally couldn't write on the board. And I remember, luckily, we had somebody doing an interview and I sat at the back for the first part of the lecture, and I couldn't have taught. I was so jittery, my hands were shaking, and I thought, this is horrible. I was getting anxious, and luckily it kind of wore off a little bit. But yeah, it's not a particularly pleasant experience. So now, you know, luckily I don't really have those problems, but I can see how it would really manifest. And I think the interesting thing about how some people break it down faster than others, because like I said, if maybe people think, oh, don't worry, I'll have a coffee at 3 p.m, but then they're maybe having problems getting to sleep, it's probably because, you know, the caffeine's not being metabolized very well.
And people get very attached to caffeine because it does give them that lift. And often you'll know in clinic, if you suggest not having caffeine, they'll kind of fight you for it. But then again, understanding yourself can be the path to improving that situation and giving it a chance. Persuading people to try it.
I guess this is where, by doing, you know, I like doing various different types of testing with certain patients of mine, and it does give you people like something hardcore, kind of, you know, physical, you've got evidence, data. And I think to present that to somebody, they'll probably take it a bit more seriously than you just sort of going, you should really cut out coffee because it's not good for you. But if you've got something physical in evidence to show them, and
it's about you, so it's not that, oh, don't you just say that to everybody. It's about you. It's like, this is one thing that for you is potentially particularly problematic, so give it a try. And it's not something that I say to everyone. So, you know, I think that does make a huge difference for people.
I agree.